How's it going, everybody? Can you guys hear me okay? We good in the back? Perfect. How's it going? I'm Riley. I am Olga's youngest grandson. I recognize a lot of you, but for those that I have not had the chance to meet yet, I'm sure I'll talk to you all later. Is that better? Okay. Got a little bit ahead of myself. Perfect. Thank you all for being here. My grandmother would have loved to see all of your faces and probably would have been having the most fun out of any of us. And she would be the first one to say she didn't deserve it all. The last time I was in here, it was probably 2011, and I was 13 years old. Miss Olga was just crowned Pioneer Queen of 2011, and her coronation was held here with her family and her community in attendance. My mom was getting prepped to read everybody a poem that she felt was fitting for the moment, but the tears came easy for her that day. And I was eager to steal some of the attention, so I stepped up and read it for her. I stand here today at 27, feeling like that same 13-year-old kid in that same spot that I read that poem, celebrating my grandmother again with her family and her community gathered in that same space under some different circumstances. I always told people that I was a descendant of royalty. And when anyone would ask me about my grandmother, I always made it a point to tell them that she was the Pioneer Queen. And being her grandson, naturally, that made me royalty too. I remember watching her coronation and looking at her thinking, this is what royalty looks like. And in a way, she was royalty. Not because she wore the crown or had her own dedicated spot in the Pioneer Days parade, but because of the way people spoke about her, with admiration, with warmth, and with love. Anywhere I went in this valley, if I made mention that my grandma was Olga Newton, it was always met with an, oh, I love Olga, every single time. She was a pillar in our family, and she was a pillar in her community, and she always knew somebody no matter where you went. When we were younger, one of my favorite things to do when we would be in town to visit her would be to go into her pantry with Shelby and Chloe and find any foods that she had tucked away that had expiration dates on them that were older than we were. And even though, oh, I lost my place. Sorry. And even though the kitchen was home to some vintage canned goods, you could count on a semi-fresh bowl of candy or some apple dumplings sitting on her kitchen island. And some days I wondered why I had such a sweet tooth, and then I realized it was mostly because of her. Every summer, we'd all head down to Ronald, and I used to watch her play the keyboard on the schoolhouse stage with Louie and Floyd. And you couldn't convince me that there was another piano player on earth that could touch her. They would play a handful of songs, and once they took a break, she would make her way down to the court, and at the time, she seemed like she was 10 feet tall. Everyone would come up to her, she could pick out everyone by name, and she could hold a conversation like it was nobody's business. I felt so much pride in those moments that I got to say that she was my grandma. She would grab my hands, and while Louie and Floyd would play some more polka and run me through the cadence on how to do the dance, while everyone in our family was doing the same. And it is a memory that I think back on most fondly when I put myself back in those 13-year-old shoes. During my senior year of high school, my grandmother suffered and survived her first stroke. Times were uncertain, but gratitude was high that she was still here. I left for college, and she was working hard to regain her strength. She was spending more time in North Bend with our family, and when I would come home to visit over Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, she would be there. She spent a lot of time crocheting or requesting that I, her waiter, go get her various things like the pie that she didn't get to try the night before, or a cup of decaf coffee, and I didn't mind. Those breaks would end, and I would be voluntold to drive her back home as I was heading back to Ellensburg for school. My mom would hand me a little bit of beer money to sweeten the deal, and Olga and I would hop in my truck and be on our way. I would always play her new music, ranging from country to rock, while mixing in some rap just to see if I could get a rise out of her. and she didn't like any of it. She would furrow her brow, trying the best to make out the words, but she'd just shake her head in distaste and say none of it was any good. Times like those were fun, and although few and far between, it meant the world to me that she tried to find some common ground with her grandson and what he liked. She would eventually wander down some tangent, spilling the hot gossip about what's going on around Cleellum, listing off names I never recognized, or she would explain to me what happened on the latest episodes of General Hospital or Days of Our Lives. Sometimes I would start to tune it out until I realized she wasn't talking anymore, so I'd look over at her to see what was going on, and she'd be fast asleep. I felt like her time machine on those days, and she felt like mine. She would be hungry when she woke up as we pulled off the exit, and she would insist that we stop at Dairy Queen before I dropped her off, and that she would pay for it, but I would never let her. At the time, it felt like just another task I had to get done before I rushed back to my college life, but here I am, wishing we could make one more stop at Dairy Queen. I don't recall the last drive we ever took together, and I don't think that when anything like that ends, anybody ever realizes it. But one day it does, and all you're left with is the memory of the days, good and old. I am fortunate that today and every day I get to feel all of the love that she shared, and that it's here with us all today, and all of that love will leave with each of you as you go. There were so many trials and tribulations she went through in this past decade, and she was stubborn, but she made a lot more life for herself because of it. Over the past couple months since she's gone on her way, I found myself weaving in and out of this grief I have felt about her dying. Reflecting on the days of old, conjuring up gentle reminders of childhood that feel like they were from a different lifetime, and it all runs the gamut. Earlier I mentioned a poem that I read at her coronation, and I know what you were all thinking. What is the poem, Riley? Well, we couldn't find it until yesterday, so I couldn't fit it into this speech. So I did something that she couldn't ever figure out, and I went to the internet and threw my thoughts into ChatGPT, and together we came up with this. Her fingers played the light, ChatGPT and Riley Peerboom. I watched her hands move easy on the keys. No rush, no show, just rhythm clear and bright. She played the tune like walking, like a breeze, each note a step that carried into light. One afternoon, she pulled me to my feet, the sounds of piano humming soft behind her grin. She showed me how the polka finds its beat, a stumble, laugh, then circling back again. She lived like that. No fear of slowing down, no worry if the steps fell out of place. And when her hands grew still, the sound stayed around, a pulse felt in every open space. She's not far off, she's dancing through the air, a tune I know because she put it there. We laid her to rest this morning, and there is a great deal of pride that I carry whenever I get to talk about my Olga. I feel this immense gratitude that I can stand up here and look out at all of you speaking about her. Well, we are all feeling that same admiration, warmth, and that love. There is not any speech that I could give that could describe everything my grandmother was. But what I do know is that she was constant, and she always will be. I will never be more proud of those moments when somebody says, "That must be the Newton in you," because I know that's from her. Thank you.